My sister and I, we do tend to create a little bit of a scene because we laugh so hard all the time. Usually we meet and we work on my comedy, and we have so much fun doing it that people are always coming up going, "What are you guys doing?" And
Yeah.
what is wrong with you? Which there's a lot wrong with us. That's why we do what we do.
Yeah. Well, I loved because when I asked you, what is something that you feel passionate about or would want to talk about, you brought up the way that people perceive you.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because I shared that assumption and then you and I got a chance to talk about it. So I'd love to hear more about what that's like for you. Like
Oh,
what does it mean to you for people to perceive you in the ways that they do and what's really behind the curtain?
yeah. Well, I kind of get a kick out of it, but honestly, I'm like a very tall, lanky, blonde, rather busty, and my name is Barbie. And so if you don't get a first impression from that, I mean, I realize not your fault.
Yeah.
Not your fault. I mean, I appear to be like a just the traditional Bellevue trad wife,
Hmm.
who plays a lot of pickleball all day. And honestly, I do play a lot of pickleball, but I'm I'm probably not your just typical person. And I think sometimes people don't give you a chance, but that's kind of maybe develop quite a personality over the years and kind of break down people's assumptions pretty quickly about me.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's nice about doing comedy. Like I'm standing up in front of strangers and I get to kind of paint my own picture of, who I am and what my life story is. And it gives me an opportunity to kind of push back on the stereotype because like my parents did not know when they named me Barbie that I would grow up to kind of resemble Barbie.
Right. Yeah.
And so not their fault. But it's just to me, it's an opportunity. And I do have to find it funny. And people always tell me, they're like, we did not expect you to be like this. And I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, but it's like I've had to try to be likable just because most people think I'm instantly not.
Mm.
That's really interesting. How has that kind of like led you to in meeting somebody else, like having been somebody that's judged, right? And it's something that kind of innately we do. Sometimes we're aware of the judgment, sometimes it's completely unaware, and sometimes it's there for safety. Like back in the day, we knew that if you wore this type of symbol, that you represented these types of values, and then we could be okay. But if you wore this type of symbol, you represented different types of values, and then that might be a little bit different than what I represent. So there might be some contention there. So we're constantly, it's a safety thing in the evolutionary side days, right? But like you meeting people now, like having been the receiving end of some like open-ended judgment, like does that change the way that you're accepting of people, or maybe see the judgment that could be forming around the person and be like, well, I know what that feels like, so I'm just going to put that over there, recognize that it's there, but just see the person for who they are.
Yeah, and I think I've really honed that skill of anytime I meet somebody, I honestly intentionally do not draw a judgment about them. I'm like, what are you? Like, who are you? Not what you look like or what do I think about you right now, but I want to find out more about what makes you tick and tell me about you. I'm just innately curious about people. And I think that curiosity is so much fun.
Hmm.
And I talk to people in grocery stores. I talk to people everywhere I go. And I'm like, I just want to know, like, you never know who you're going to meet. And everybody has like a really great story. And I
Mm.
get a lot of material that way too. So
I
just
think
kind of
what's
dipping into people and what they do and who they are. I love to get material that way.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think what's interesting as I was listening to you say that, I was going to ask the question if you feel like that has helped you develop your curiosity, which I felt like Adam was also pointing at. But then it made me realize like how often we assume that we're the only ones who have that experience, right? Like you being tall and blonde and busty representing someone that looks like Barbie and then having the name Barbie is, it's a cultural thing, like the at least in America, right? Like most of us from I don't know what time frame Barbie was developed, but it was a long time ago.
I think the 60s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And so like we grew up with that prototype and goal as a lot of young girls do. Um but like Adam was also saying, like he gets judged, right, for the way that he looks, and I get judged for the way that I look. And the reality is like everybody is forming some kind of judgment or assumption when they look at a person. But I would love for you to share, like, where did the comedy start for you and what are people not seeing? Because what I hear in that developed curiosity is a sense of getting to know someone. And I don't want to say that that's rare, but it's not as common as I think it could be. And I think it is a characteristic that I mean, that's what this whole podcast is based on, is like, let's tell stories that people can relate to and understand that just because you see somebody, I'll just throw out there like a missing front tooth or like neck tattoos or like these drastic things that we can categorize as a certain type of person doesn't mean that you have any room to like make those assumptions. So people make assumptions about you. We'll just say, actually, I would love to hear, what do you think people assume about you when they see you?
Well, I'll back up a little bit because I have to say I had a really good role model. Well, I don't know if she was a great role model, but my mom, if you thought I looked kind of like a Barbie doll, my mom looks like an actual Barbie doll. Like she was so beautiful growing up that that's what I knew, but I also knew like how deep down to earth and wonderful she was. And just seeing the way that people responded to her, like the difficulty she had making girlfriends and things like that. That's when I was really watching and paying attention, going, how could she make this better? How what would really help? And I think that's kind of where my curiosity in people started. And when I meet somebody, like if there's something curious about them, like they have face tattoos or, something, my instant reaction is like, I want to know the story behind this. Like, tell me how that came about. And you really find out so much about what people have gone through and their hardships and, what happens in Vegas sometimes.
Right.
Well, I
Yeah.
imagine that helps too with your crowd work, just being a
Yeah.
comedian, being able to be like, hey, you look like you got a good story. You're wearing this thing, or you've got this symbol on you, or you've got this, whatever, and it's like,
Yeah.
as a comedian, like, yeah, my eye is drawn to you and you look interesting. So let's unpack that.
Yeah, it's just human interest. And that's, I think, the funnest part about being a comedian is that you have this whole display of it in front of you, and you can just kind of feel people and who's going to be receptive or not. Well, usually to be able to chat with them in the audience. And people are usually more than open and willing and excited that you are interested in them, whether it's during a show or just at the grocery store. It's like
Yeah.
they love to be recognized and paid attention to. And I just ask the questions. I'm like, how did you get that flower on your forehead? I just have
Yeah.
to know.
Well, I think
Yeah.
that the nice part about that is there's a difference between curiosity to learn and curiosity to define, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you this question because I want to be able to categorize you or put you in a box versus like I'm genuinely curious.
Yeah.
So when we started talking in our call to like get ready for the podcast and whatnot, I was stunned when you started to share with me like your origin story. So I would love it if you felt open to sharing that here. Like, where did comedy come into your life? Like you are now in your 50s?
Yeah, I'm 54.
Yep. So in your
Mhm.
50s and been doing comedy work in the last how many years?
I started doing comedy about 11 years ago,
Okay.
and I took a big hiatus out of it. Of course, we had the pandemic,
Right.
but I was just doing comedy really for fun. I had taken my friend that I worked with forced me into a stand-up comedy class, literally forced me into it. And I was like, what have you done to me? And I loved it so much. And I got up and performed and just like hearing the laughs from people. And I was like, oh my God, this is the best feeling I've ever had in my entire life.
Mm.
I want to do this. And then I kind of pivoted and, well, I'll tell you this story first. No, I'll tell you my life story first. There's so much. I have such a story. Um, so basically, my sister and I, we grew up in the boonies. My dad moved us out there when I was 9, and my sister's 2.5 years older than I. And we grew up out in Eastern Washington, in a place called Summit Valley. And we
Mm.
had a 300 acres in the wilderness, and it was incredibly isolated out there.
Yeah.
And my dad wanted to live off the land. So we did a lot of, killing our own food and just kind of living like a pioneer, really. And at the time when you're 9, that's not ideal.
Yeah.
And we had to do things that what were just like we thought it was normal, but I guess it's not normal. Like we had to sleep in a woodshed in the dead of winter because we didn't have enough space in the house.
Mm.
And that's where I think comedy and laughter really turned to survival for both my sister and I. Like literally to stay warm, we realized if we could laugh ourselves silly in that woodshed, we could generate a lot of heat in there.
Mm.
And we would just stay up and just laugh and laugh and laugh and make each other laugh. Like that was our entire focus, which was really just to not freeze to death.
Yeah.
But our entire lifestyle was just like sticking together and laugh and stay warm. And we kind of developed a whole new perspective on life this way
Mm.
of just finding things funny, going, I'm going to share this with my sister in the woodshed tonight, and I'm going to win our comedy contest in our sleeping bags.
Right. Where were you before moving to the boonies?
We moved there from Illinois. My dad worked for the railroad.
Okay.
So we moved like every 2 years, which also, when you're young and moving every year or two, you develop the ability to talk to people and make new friends really quickly.
Right.
So we just go knock on people's doors and be like, hi, we're here now for a little while. And and we loved people, we loved making new friends. But when you're out in the boonies, there weren't a lot of people.
Yeah.
And we went to a 2-room schoolhouse out there,
Mm.
which looking back, it was probably one of the coolest things that we got to do. We had like survival class and
Mm.
hunting class.
Welcome, love. If you're feeling the pull to remember your power, soften your body, and return to your truth, I invite you into my world of healing arts and transformational coaching. I'm Awa Wild, intuitive guide, energy medicine woman, and creator of Sensuous Revival Healing Arts. I help individuals and couples release old patterns, dissolve shame, reconnect with pleasure, and rise into a more liberated life. Through sacred pelvic healing, somatic practices, intuitive body talk, and emotional integration, you'll learn to listen to your body, trust your intuition, and create relationships that feel nourishing and aligned. Whether you work with me one-on-one, join a retreat, or step into my online program, you'll receive an experience of deep presence, compassionate guidance, and practices that create lasting change. If your soul is ready for more freedom, more pleasure, and deeper truth, I'm here. Learn more at sensuousrevival.com or reach out directly to begin your journey.
There's a book that I read a while ago, and just to speak to you and your sisters, making each other laugh and finding, some kind of peace. And it's like a trauma bonding in a way, right? We're in this shitty situation, and the way that we're going to get through it is to do this thing, and we're going to find purpose in that and find meaning. There's a book called Tribe that came out a number of years ago, and it talks a lot about opportunities like that, right? Where there's worldwide possibilities for us to just look at life differently in traumatic experiences. And one of the examples that they talk about was during World War II when England was being bombed, like heavily, heavily bombed, like every day, just bombs dropping from German soldiers, right? And there's a story about an insane asylum or a psychiatric ward that was that full of people during the bombings. And as soon as the bombing started, all of those people went out and started pulling people out of the rubble and started handing out food. And these are clinically insane people, right? And they weren't out there in their straitjackets doing it. They were human beings having a purpose, doing a thing. And the point of that story for the book was saying, like, when humans have a purpose, they can overcome a lot of interesting things, whether it's clinical, whether it's medical, whether it's your own personality. If you have a purpose, you put a lot of that shit aside and you're like, oh, I'm doing this thing now. I'm going to go help humanity. Right. And so kind of like with you and your sister, it's like, hey, we could be fucking cold as hell right now and miserable, or we can see who's going to make the person to laugh the most and stay warm by doing it, stay alive, and create these amazing memories where it could be something really shitty.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it kind of reminds me of, Viktor Frankl and A Man's Search for Meaning in the concentration camps, which, talk about making the best out of a situation, but it does keep you sane. So it was our sanity just to, stay alive and make the best of every day.
Yep. And
Did you feel that you were the funny one in like your school and in your friend groups and stuff like that? Was that also kind of a common thread?
I talk too much in class.
Yeah, I had that on every report card, which I've actually made jokes about being now on a podcast. I'm like, ha ha ha. See, you guys thought that it wasn't going to take me anywhere.
I think it's the best thing somebody can have on the report card. I always try to get my son to bring that home. I'm like, bring home the talks too much one.
Right. It is interesting though, when I think about my talks too much and my role as like the entertainer. As I've gotten older, there's actually been some really interesting grief that's come through in recognizing that for myself. And it's when I don't feel funny or I don't feel interesting, or really just like I don't want to be some kind of like trick and pony for someone, right? And actually just heard this song recently that spoke so beautifully to it. Like I'd basically just like cried through the whole thing, and that could be perimenopause or it could just be the fact that it was beautiful. But yeah, I'm curious, like at any point in your life has this role, we'll call it a role, but like character that you have embodied, has it ever not felt as joyful as it has appeared?
I've had my moments. I think I had some pretty rocky times. The other thing that happened in our family, my mom finally couldn't deal with that lifestyle anymore, and my mom and dad had a really brutal divorce. They didn't speak again for over 20 years. And my mom kind of was living her life. But when I was 16, my dad broke his neck skiing.
Ooh.
Which he was living his best life at that time. He was a single guy and just super athletic and, doing his thing. And he broke his neck. He hit a lift tower in a ski race. And so just very instantly, our lives completely changed, and we had adapted really well. We're like, we're going to be normal. We're going to make it through. Everything's going to be like a normal life from here on out. And what happened with that is my sister had just started college at UW, and I was in high school, so 16. And my dad became a C4-5 quadriplegic, which means like you don't have your hands or your legs. You're basically just He had shoulder
Mm-hmm.
control and his head control and his brain. And that's really all he had to work with. And so I remember the doctor coming out and saying, like, just so you know, your life is never going to be the same again.
Oh God.
And that was probably the closest we got to any sort of trauma counseling
Mm.
because like nobody asked if we were okay. And they're just like, here's your dad, take care of him. And it's like we didn't know how to take care of ourselves at that time. So it was a pretty dramatic way for life to change for us. Like we were just looking forward to getting out and enjoying the world and living a life. And it was like, sorry,
Mhm.
not for you. You're
Mm.
going to have this life now. It's not a choice.
Yeah,
So,
how did you and your sister manage that? You know, with your sister being in college, you know, knocking on college's door. You know, you both moving through your late teens and the 20s. Like, how did that impact you? Like then, but actually, also looking back now. With hindsight being a blessing, it gives us time for for the emotions to maybe change a little bit, for us to create a narrative that makes a little more sense. But how did that impact you and your sister then? And then maybe, how are you looking at it now is maybe more of a, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but sometimes we get enough time away and we can be like, I can see the gift that was, or the reason
yeah.
that I needed to learn that lesson, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think at the time, we were just a little bit in shock with it. And my dad ended up being in the hospital and rehab for almost a full year
Wow.
until I graduated
Mm-hmm.
from high school. And at that time, one of the things that had changed is that there were no funds for my college. And
Gotcha.
so my dad had lost any bit of money he did have in the accident. And so I had a few choices. Like I could have gotten married
Mm-hmm.
or I could join the military. And all I knew is I did not want to have a life where I just took care of my dad.
Hmm.
And so my choice was I decided to work for a year as far away as I possibly could.
Mm-hmm.
And I became a nanny in Boston, like out on Cape Cod on a private island, which was that's a whole story in itself. That was wild time. We lived like next door to the DuPonts and the
Oh,
Kennedys, and
wow.
it was it was probably not the best experience, but it was it was a wow experience.
Well, what a
And
drastic change going from living in the wilderness to living on an island on the other side of the continent around insanely rich people.
Yeah.
it was
That's such a
and they
dichotomy.
were crazy. They were crazy. And I was like, oh my God, I thought I had crazy where I came from. This is a whole new level of crazy going on here. It was fascinating.
Yeah, I bet.
But I couldn't really do that either. I decided I better come back and try to take care of my dad. So he had moved to Kirkland to be closer to my sister at the University of Washington by that time. And so I moved in with him and was like, okay, here I am, 18 years old, and I'm going to be my dad's personal care attendant.
Wow.
I slept on his couch and had to like get his 250-pound body like lifting in and out of bed every day.
Mm.
And I would say, like, being an 18-year-old girl, I would not recommend being a personal care attendant for your father. I think, like being one of the first penises you ever see and handle, you don't want that to be
Yeah.
your dad doing a catheter. It was really jarring
Hmm.
for me, and I had a lot of trouble dealing with it.
Yeah.
And it was brutal. And I just like, I cannot do this. I just can't. And I think that's where like my first boundaries came in where I'm like, I am not okay.
Yeah.
This is not okay. I can't do this. And he hired somebody because I was just like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Oh, it still gives me GBs. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
I'm just
I was
thinking about
gonna.
myself. Like I have a 22 and 17-year-old daughters, and I could not imagine. I mean, we all step up where we need to step up, but like Jesus Christ, like I couldn't imagine like my daughter being in your position and being like, "Hey, dad needs his catheter changed." It's like, "Fuck, man, how
Well, and that's
just."
not the worst of it. One of the things that Barbie and I chatted about. So I was a nurse assistant
Hmm.
way back when, and I worked for a quadriplegic. And this person was not in my family. He was not a friend. He was definitely not my father. And I really struggled with some of the care because the things that people don't consider in that regard is everything about them has to be done for
Right.
them, right? There's bed sores, there's, just natural grooming, brushing their teeth, wiping the goop out of their eyes, right? Like all of
Yeah.
these things. But the bowel movements and being able to manage a body with that, like, it's just, it's intense. And yeah, I think like I can't imagine what it would have been like living out in the boonies off grid, growing up in a 2-room schoolhouse, and then moving to the East Coast and being around probably some of the most pomp individuals in that time and in this region, and then coming back. And yeah, and catheters are no joke, especially when it's someone that you're really close to. Like, yeah, I applaud you. And I also want to like give you a giant hug for how traumatic that all had to have been. And so, how long, I think we had talked about it, but how long, well, we didn't talk about it on here, but how long were you caring for your father before he brought in help?
I think it was at least, it feels like 100 years, but I think it was only about 6 months before I finally like broke.
Yeah.
Like, and like my sister was, around, but she was in college, and um, I was the, night and morning. So getting up in the middle of the night to actually turn them over so they don't get bed sores. Like
Yeah.
it was a constant, it's a tough job. Like I have so much respect for people who do personal care.
Yeah.
It is, it is an intensive, like takes all of you out of it. So
Yeah.
I finally just said, I think I'm going to lose my mind. Like I was having mental health issues, and I was like, I'm not going to be okay, or I'm going to have to go make my own space, and you're going to have to figure this out, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, so, but to give my dad some credit too, and I think this is, looking back when, like, where did I gain my resilience for a lot of the things I've been through in life? And he was such a huge part of that, such a big learning lesson of making the best out of something.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he could have just been, done, depressed, wanting to kill himself. And he decided, like, okay, my body's gone, but I still have my brain. And
Mm-hmm.
he had never finished college, but he went back to college as a quadriplegic
Wow.
Mm.
in his late 40s and got his business degree. And he ended up going to work for like a bunch of really huge government agencies. And he was very good at it and very smart. And he after about, I don't know, maybe 5 years in Kirkland or so, he kind of got whisked away to different areas, and he ended up moving down to Olympia and then to California and then to Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
And during that time, he learned how to drive his own van. So he
Oh.
got this whole new sense of independence. And he helped with the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Mm.
And he worked under the Bush and Obama administration in Washington, D.C., running the Independent Living Council there. And he's in the Spinal Cord Hall of Fame next
Wow.
to Christopher Reeve. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
So, I mean, his story, he's an incredible man. And I think what a blessing that was to have that kind of role model to just be like, this isn't going to define me, you know. So
Hmm.
you look at that and talk about being judged, being a quadriplegic rolling down the street, like people, you're going to get judged too. So that was another way I looked at that, where I was like, nobody knows what an incredible guy this is right here.
Yeah.
Great representations of in your life of the opportunities to be judged from an outward perspective, right? From the name that you grew up with to your dad being a quadriplegic to, it's like there's so many opportunities to be like, nope, that's just who I am, or I'm just gonna, submit to this type of moniker because that's what I look, feel, act like. Nope,
Yeah.
sorry, that's just a label. Get to know me. I'm gonna be fucking awesome. Guess what? Quadriplegic, going to California, work under two fucking presidential administrations. It's all perspective, right? It's all perspective. How do
Right.
you want? Are you gonna submit to what other people think about you, or can you be like, yeah, that's an outward facing thing, but also I'm funny as shit, right? Look at all this. And, some of the comedians that I don't know that many comedians, and none of them are famous by any means, but the people that I know that the funniest people I know have gone through some of the most traumatic things that I've ever even heard of, not even been able to just imagine, and I think there is a way to alchemize these things in our life to be something that becomes our superpower rather than the thing that we just feel submitted to. And it
Yeah.
seems like, as traumatic as that arc might have been for you and your sister, or the family in general, on the back end of it, you're finding a lot of positivity with maybe some of the way that might have came out.
Yeah. And I think that's where I developed a lot of optimism as well, is, always like I could examine something until I find a silver lining in it. I'm like, there's one, all this shit, there's got to be a pony in here, just. And I think you do develop superpowers, like, especially if you're disabled. If you lose your eyesight, all your other senses become superpowers.
Mhm.
Right.
And if you lose your body, like, and I got to kind of walk beside that and watch my dad's superpowers that he used and learn from that. And I'm like, that's such a huge opportunity to notice things that other people would never notice. Like, I'll
Mm.
be in a city and be like, how does somebody get a wheelchair down here? Or how do you reach the top shelf of a grocery store? Or
Right.
Right.
so many little things just in the world.
I'm curious, after that time period of caring for your father and he called in, other help, what did life look like for you? And were you aware at that time of how traumatizing that had all been? Were you actively kind of seeking support, or did you do like most 18-year-olds and wild out for a little while?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I did have the opportunity to go to community college and I worked full time. I got to live
Yeah.
some life finally, and I had a great time. Like I had so much fun. I felt like it was a gift to be able to do all these things, and I worked really hard to do them.
Mm.
So I did get a little bit of college in. I got my AA degree, and I always had this feeling though, like I wanted to run away.
Mm.
And I tried to join the Coast Guard when I was living with my dad. I was like, I know if I join the military, I can get out of here.
Yeah.
And he put a stop to that pretty quickly. But I just was like, how can I run away from the situation? But I couldn't. So I just had to kind of fight through it. And I think just my sister was my only support. She was the only one who truly knew, like we understood each other and we could try to explain to people what we were going through.
Mhm.
We never got like counseling or therapy. We
Mm.
really needed it badly, but nobody asked if we were okay, like ever. Like, how are you guys doing? It
Yeah.
was just like, where's the concern for
Yeah.
what's happening here?
Are you
But
so
there's
close with
like,
your
well,
sister?
I'm so close with my
Cool.
sister.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because so I'm imagining this is like in the 80s and 90s, this time frame of life.
Yeah.
And I'm in my mid 40s, so most of my childhood was in the 80s and 90s, and now I I don't think people really knew or really understood they didn't know how to be supportive for people, right?
Mm.
I think, like I'll speak for myself. When I finally realized I was just regurgitating the things I saw on TV, like, oh, it's okay, stop crying, everything will be fine. It's just a time of your, just regret. Like I had no idea that I was inflaming a situation. I wasn't intending to, but I didn't have the tools to be like, no, it's okay to cry. Like, I'll hold your emotion for you. Like, your emotions are not too big for me. Like, a lot of the things that make a lot of sense now weren't even there, right? And so some of this, people just trying their hardest. They're doing the best they can, right? And creating space for that, but also not succumbing to that's just the best it's going to be, And it's like, again, like a lot of this stuff alchemized the right way, it just turns into like, the amazingly balanced person that we're talking to right now, like understanding that, like you'll have an outward looking facade that will barely scratch the surface of who you are as a person, right? Whether you're, a blonde, tall woman named Barbie or a quadriplegic father, right? Everybody's going to have their own individual story. And like such a hard lesson to learn at a young age, but Jesus Christ, what a beautiful way to continue through, into your adulthood with these kind of experiences, whether or not you alchemized them at that point in time or still we're working on it. It's like those examples, the biggest changes and advancements in our life come from the biggest traumas. Right.
Yeah.
It's not like we're sitting on the beach with our feet in the sand, drinking a margarita, being like, look at I'm fucking advancing in life. Look how enlightened. No, it's like, oh, I just picked myself up from my bootstraps and dragged my face across the dirt. And I'm going to dust myself off and get out there and do it again. And I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we grew up in the generation of just walk it off, suck it up.
Oh my God.
100%.
Walk it off for
Smile,
sure.
sweetie.
I still see that
It's-
happening though. Like, my son plays some pretty intense sports, and I'm always the mom on the sideline that's like, stop the game. Somebody has a hangnail. And not literally, but like, there's a kid down. And what's crazy is that in this sport, particularly in lacrosse, they don't stop the game unless that person is clearly not going to get up. And so it's still giving off that message of like, get up, walk it off. And, yeah, it was I don't know, like a few weeks back, maybe a month ago, that like the F word came flying out of my mouth. And you can get in trouble from, being a parent yelling at the refs. And there were families near me that I didn't know that weren't part of our team. And I looked over and I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And they're like, no, that was called for. And I was like, okay. But, thinking back about what it was like in life to be an 18-year-old, I'm just going to say child, because that's really all we are. Whoever decided, well, I know who decided 18 is not grown up. So you go off, you do a couple years of college and get to experience what that version of freedom and that chapter of your life look like. And recognizing now that people weren't checking in on you. When did life start to shift, and when did you notice, and when did you see kind of the hardships showing up in your life, and what did you do with it?
Well, I would say, like, even though I got to go to community college and work full time, I still had to take care of my dad, but just on a very different level of like, I can come over and feed you. I'm not going to be doing your catheter. I knew what was causing me to have this kind of angst and panic attacks. And, I would do it if I had to, but please don't make me do it. It was kind of my theory. I'm like, I want to do the fun things. I want to have like good memories and good times with you. So I think where everything kind of settled down in that time was when my dad kind of took control of his own life and quit expecting that we were going to be his entire life for his entire life. So with that a switch in his attitude and him developing new skills and things like that, I think that was our first glimmer of hope and freedom that we got. And when he actually like moved away, we were worried about him, but also we're like, oh my God, we can do what we want for the first time in our lives, and we were at that point like mid-20s, and oh my God, we lived it up. We didn't take one moment for granted of our new freedoms. And So I think we are still to this day like that. Like every single day, we embrace every freedom we have and the freedom of choice, and encourage our kids just the same way. Like if you have an opportunity, take it. Say yes. Say yes. Do something crazy. Do something wild, and live because you can
Hmm.
right
Yeah.
now.
So where
So
where
I
did
think
when did comedy start to move into this? Was this like one of those, because you just spoke about like if you get an opportunity, say yes. Was this
mhm.
something like you talked about you and your sister having comedy matches? So when did it finally come to this thing? Like I'm gonna do this thing. I feel like I'm drawn to it. I feel like I'm constantly making people laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where did all this start to like kind of move into where you're at now?
Well, I think kind of where I honed my stage skills is that I did direct sales, and I was in a direct sales group. We sold candles and home accessories, and I was really, really good at it.
Hmm.
So I rose like high up in the company really quickly, and it was so much fun. We had so much fun. And I spent a lot of time like on stage motivating people. And it was just such a natural thing for me to do and to be funny on stage. And like every time I do like a presentation, people were like, you should be doing stand-up comedy. And so that was just kind of a constant like through my sales of like, you should do comedy, you should do comedy. And any job I ever had, they're like, you need to do comedy, because I'd create comedy shows like everywhere I went. And it was always in the back of my mind, like, that is probably what I should be doing. But I also thought, well, that's not what life is about. I have to do hard things. I have to do a
Life
real
has to
job.
be
I have to be
hard.
an adult,
Hmm.
you know. Um, so I tried to be an adult for a while and get like, the real serious jobs. I was an executive director. I was kind of following in my dad's like nonprofit footsteps, but I was having so much fun with all the people and still doing stand up and everything I was doing.
Mm.
Um, so and it was in one of those jobs that I was started to kind of lean into the comedy, and I started doing some. And then I had another great tragedy happen in my life.
Mm.
But I'm really good at tragedy now. That's a fun part. Is like the weird thing about my sister and I is if there's a situation that's like chaos or is tragic in some way and people are frantic and freaking out, my sister and I are incredibly calm.
Yeah.
Like it's just the weirdest thing where to us that's like calming.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so one of my dearest friends, this was back when I think it was like 2018. Um, she died by suicide.
Hmm.
And that rocked my world really, really hard because I knew she was having problems, did not know how to help her. And she had a 13-year-old daughter, and I had a 13-year-old son, and we had raised them from birth like twins together, just kind of single parent, co-parenting this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what to do to help her, and I could not save her. And so she took her own life. And before she did that, though, she said, please make sure my daughter's going to be okay.
Hmm.
Mm.
And that was hard.
Yeah.
That was probably one of the hardest things. And so I just changed my whole life again. I just like pivot. I'm like, well, I don't ever want this to happen to anybody else. I'm going to go into mental health.
Hmm.
And I went back to school and I got my psychology degree, and I started teaching youth mental health first aid. I took on her child, and I was just on a mission. I'm like, okay. And I went to work for the National Alliance on Mental Illness East Side. I was the executive director there,
That's
but it was so
NAMI for anybody
frustrating.
who doesn't know.
What was
Oh,
that?
what?
I said that's NAMI for anybody who doesn't know. If you,
Yeah.
a lot of people may listen to this and want to look that up later. You can just use the acronym NAMI.
It's an excellent organization. I love what they do, but it was the most frustrating because I wanted to help people. I was like, I'm on a mission. I need to save people. I need to help people. And I just felt with our healthcare system, like I couldn't do it. And so it kind of sucked the soul right out of me. And I was like, I'm going about this the wrong way, I think.
Yeah.
And I kind of reflected on other ways that I could help. And so I still teach classes in high schools as a guest teacher. I teach coping skill classes. So I'm like, I'm still going to use what I have.
Yeah.
But that's when I turned back to what got me through and kept me sane. And it was laughter.
Mm.
I was like, where do I put these kind of passions and kind of put it all together? And it just came like loud and clear to me that like you need to make people laugh. You can. So you can change the lives of 50 to 200 people in a room. And you're going to feel so good about that. And I can sit there and I can watch them laugh for like an hour and I can watch their physical stress leave their body. I'm reducing depression and helping them burn calories. So
Right? The trifecta.
Right.
yeah, and I mean those are facts.
That's
Like
almost as good as sex.
Right? Yeah.
yeah, and I can't do enough for everybody for that, you know.
Right.
So it's the laughter.
You know what's interesting is in 2014, I was struggling probably with the darkest stages of my experience with depression. At this point, I had been sober almost 6 years, 2015, 2015. Yes. And out of left field, I just like was completely sideswiped from this really dark headspace. And at this point, I had been, sober for a long time. I was working a 12-step program. I had a therapist regularly. I had a job I loved. My kids were doing great. Like there was nothing circumstantially that made sense. And I turned to comedy. I actually started putting on Joe Coy. I don't think I knew how Ali Wong was at the time, but Joe Coy, Kevin Hart, John Mulaney, Kathy, is it Mulligan?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I love her. I should know her name.
Madigan.
Madigan. Thank you.
Madigan, okay.
She felt like home to me. Like her comedy reminded me of like my family. And so, but what was such an indicator of how I was feeling was how much I could or couldn't laugh. And it's still the thing that I will turn to now when I find myself in a state of lacking emotional expression, right? So if I'm in a situation and normally I could be crying over something and I'm not, or normally I could be laughing and I'm not, then that's kind of a way that I turn to like wake up my senses and bring me back online again. And I don't think that this method is talked about enough in the mental health arena. And it's kind of baffling to me because when you think about like ancient times before different medications were available, that's what everybody did. They sung and they danced and they cried and they held each other. And that was like I don't remember there's a proverb from somewhere that says like, if you're feeling depressed, look at when was the last time you danced and sang, right?
Yeah.
And so I love that you took, a lifetime of tragedy. I was trying to paint it in a lighter picture, but let's just say, a lifetime of tragedy, moving from a seemingly normal life in the city to the boonies and living off grid and sleeping in a woodshed during the winter where it's freezing and adapting to having a father have a tragic accident after already going through a tragic divorce. Like that alone is like, that's a lot, right? But then to finally find some semblance of freedom and then have your best friend pass from suicide, like I say these things and I also want to recognize like this is normal. Like everybody in life has a series of tragedies, but to go to school to get your psych degree and to go work for this incredible organization that does enormous, like an immeasurable amount of support for people in the mental health space, and to go and to honor yourself enough to go, I'm not using my gifts in the way that's most impactful and good for me. Because I think a lot of people take their gifts and they go into these organizations and they get so wrapped around their identity that even though it's costing them their soul life force, they stay.
Yeah.
And like, how beautiful that you pivoted again. And I can only just see Ross on the stairwell yelling, pivot,
Pivot.
pivot. And so, yeah, okay, after you did that pivot and you started teaching these classes, it sounds like you took your best friend's daughter in. Is that?
She still had a father, but he moved to Arizona, so I took her in to keep her in school here
Okay.
for a while, which she's just like a daughter to me. I mean, she always has been, so it was easy. And the good news is she is more than okay.
Yeah.
She is the most delightful, positive, mentally stable, beautiful young lady. I look at both those kids and I'm like, I don't know how you guys turned out so great, but they turned out really, really great. And they're like, we're fine now. I'm like, okay. And they really are. Like, I trust that they're going to have the most amazing lives and they don't have mental health issues. And like, I think it's because they laugh so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to your point, and A was alluding to this with the setup for the question earlier, but like I've seen so many people that have gotten degrees in like mental health or in teaching or in some kind of way to be to help humanity. Let's just say it like that, like nurses, all that stuff, right? And countless people also they feel so shackled by these organizations that they wanted to be a part of so they could help, but now they can't do the help they think they could because of the restrictions that are there. I mean, my mom passed away from cancer a few years ago, and that whole process, like, we got shit help from the doctors and amazing help from the nurses. The doctors came in with their clipboards, barely knew my mom's name, any of that shit, and then they would leave, and then the nurses would be like, you should try turkey tail mushrooms. You didn't hear that from me. Shit like that, where it's like, oh, great, fucking hell, let's do that, right? And so, like, it's so beautiful to know that well, I get the understanding. I understand why there's restrictions, there's guidelines, HIPAA, all that shit, right? Get it. But I really appreciate people that still that enter that and say, like, I don't want to do that. I want to still help people. I'm going to take this knowledge base that I have and now do this with it. And comedy for me is like you guys are talking about, is the best medicine. We're laughing, we're elating, we're emoting, right? And to be able to do that with the lens of a psychiatric help person and like knowing that, like, I'm going to be up here and do the thing a comedian does, but I'm also a therapist and I can actually really kind of like help a lot, whether you realize it's being helpful or not, right? It's just like, it's so beautiful, and not in a nefarious way, but just like just to take that knowledge and say, I'm still going to find my way to help. I'm still going to show up. I'm still going to be a person that people can go to. I just don't want to follow your rules.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So do you find like your comedy being one cathartic for you, but also like you see just like the joy that you bring to people's lives? Like, it's just such a, I imagine the reciprocity there is just really beautiful.
Yeah. I think just watching people walk into a room and walk out of the room with just a different, kick in their step or a smile on their face, or you can just feel the lightness that comes off of people when they're in there laughing together. And I think group laughter is one of the most amazing things. Like, I've studied laughter and comedy pretty deeply because I am a major nerd. And I watch and I'm like, I know what I just did is I reduced your cortisol by 32 to 37%.
Love that.
And you now have a 25% less likely chance of becoming depressed. So I just supported that for you. I could have just pulled you out of depression as your first step. And not to mention the blood flow and the relaxation that I got going in your body.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, it's funny that you
um,
say that because I was literally just pulling up the science because I'm also a huge nerd about that stuff. And yeah, everything on this list, it's like spikes dopamine and serotonin, flushes cortisol from your system. It helps with your parasympathetic nervous system, resetting, cognitive reframing. Like, it's so vital that we take the time really and prioritize laughter. And this is something that, again, I'll just say it, like, it just doesn't get enough credit. And I love that this has been part of your pivot. And coming back to like the origin of how we met, I'd love for you to share what are the bits or the stories that you speak of that you feel like are really hitting home for the people that you're sharing the comedy with. Like, are there certain topics that you like to talk about? Um, because I just think that that's great.
yeah. Well, I know I have a large 50 plus audience,
Yeah.
because I talk a lot about, getting older and kind of how difficult it is for Barbie to start looking old. Like I feel inside, I feel better than I have in so long. And I feel like I'm, like 16 years old inside me.
Mm-hmm.
Outside, not so much. It's starting to show. Um, so I talk a lot about aging and menopause,
Mm-hmm.
and people can really relate to that. And I do talk about kind of our upbringing and our lifestyle, and in a funny way.
Yeah.
I don't actually talk about my dad very often. Um, I just haven't found the way to put that in there yet, but I'm sure I'll find a way
Yeah.
and work on that.
Right.
So it's some pretty general, I like to relate to people, but just getting up there and kind of seeing who's in front of me too, going, what would you guys seem to like today?
So does your sister share the stage with you at all? I know you've talked about how close you are and that she's sits and helps you a lot of times with your comedy. How does that play out for her in her life?
I would say like Sarah Silverman and her sister, I'd say that's kind of how our relationship is when it comes to our comedy.
Mm-hmm.
My sister helps me write my comedy, hone my comedy. She keeps me from saying things that I shouldn't say, which is a lot, where she's like, you can't say that. And I'm like,
Oh,
okay, I can,
You
yeah.
I
sure?
won't then. So she keeps me on point, and we like to sit and write comedy together.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been always more the stage one.
Mm-hmm.
She's more of the background one, and she's a writer. She's just published her first book, Unemployable.
Oh,
Give her a
great.
plug for that. It's a fantastic book. Um, but we talk probably 50 times a day.
I love
So
that.
yeah, I can't get enough of her, and we are so blessed to have each other. So she's my entire like support system, and my husband's very supportive too. He's like, whatever makes you happy. And he means it. He's like, I just want you to be happy because, happy wife, happy
Yeah.
life.
Do
Yeah.
you still find comedy like a healing outlet for yourself? You've talked a lot about like the different, maybe the different types of opportunities you've had to move through healing processes. Is comedy still something that you find for yourself, like being up there and performing, and is that something that you find like it rejuvenates you? It helps you kind of move through some things in life.
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think performing comedy is the most therapeutic thing you can do. Like, I'm sure I had all kinds of wounds and gaps in me from my whole life of stuff. And it feels like everything's kind of healed up. Like, I
Mm.
feel very whole. I feel very confident with who I am. And I owe a lot of that to really standing up and doing comedy. And it's terrifying. Some people think like, oh, it just must be easy for you. But no, I'm deathly terrified and anxious every time I get up and do comedy. My sister has to like come over and like tell me to go shower, eat, have some water, go run around the block, and let me get you dressed. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm a wreck before a show, but once I get up and a microphone, it's just like everything just lets go and releases, and I'm just like in the moment.
Yeah.
So
I think there's
it's
a layer
very
of
healing.
a layer of like what you just spoke of. Like I'm a yoga teacher, right? And I don't have as much pressure on me. I've got a pre-planned class. It kind of might be the same thing from last week. Um, and not everybody's looking at me. They're hearing me, but they're not looking at me. And I get nervous, right? And I'm like, oh fuck, I've been doing this for a long time. Same students, same facility, and I'm still like, oh god, I'm just like get a little palm sweaty. And I had a friend tell me a long time ago that just means you care, right? It means you
Yeah.
care about what you're doing. You want to show up and you want to do the best thing. So like, they told me like if you walked in there like brushing your dirt off your shoulders, like go fuck off. I'm gonna go teach some yoga. It's like, well, maybe you should be humbled a little bit,
Mhm.
So I think there's an honor of that, where it's like, okay, cool. Like I still feel anxious. I feel like, oh, I want to make sure I do a good job. I think there's that level of maybe professionalism or just honor of the craft that you're working towards.
Yeah. Well, that must be what it is.
Yeah. I do want to say too, like, I know we've been talking a lot about comedy and we've also been talking a lot about tragedy and mental health. I am curious, and I want to share this, even if it's not part of your story, but collectively, that comedy is not always going to be the answer. And I'm curious what other, like you said, when you were kids and all of this had happened with your mom and dad divorcing, and then your dad's accident that nobody was checking in on you. At what point did you do therapy? And has that supported you in your healing and also in your comedy?
Well, I'm not proud of this because I really would have loved a therapist. And I think if I would have had a therapist during all that, it probably wouldn't have taken me so long to kind of deal and recover and find my way.
Mm-hmm.
But I did not. I did not have any like mental health support coming from anywhere. The only thing I had was my sister, honestly. And
Yeah.
we did a pretty good job. We're pretty good therapists. Um, we have a lot of compassion for people, and so we had each other. And so I would say that we're probably each other's therapists. But I do highly recommend everybody get one. It wasn't until I was in my late 40s where I was like, I want a therapist. Everybody has a therapist. I want a therapist. And I found a really great lady who kind of did like Reiki
Mm-hmm.
and therapy. And she really kind of dug down into some of those wounds and was like, well, let's just look at this. What's this in here? And I'm like, ooh, I put that away. I don't want to look at that. It's fine where it is. And she's like, no, let's deal with this. And I was like, oh my God, there's so much that I just kind of, put a little shell around. I'm like, that'll be fine in there.
Right.
So she did help me to kind of discover that, oh, there was a lot of tragedy I'd been kind of just kept locked away. So
Yeah.
I got it out and dealt with it, and it was freeing. I was like, oh, I forgave a lot of things that happened in my life and let go of resentment. I was just like, oh my God, I feel like so light now.
Mm,
What would that would have what would happen if that would have happened when I was 16,
Right.
right.
Dang, I'd be an amazing person. I'd be president.
Well, even up until now, where therapy and mental health opportunities are more openly talked about and encouraged, there's still stigmas around them. And so back in the 80s and 90s, there was such a stigma around going to a doctor or a shrink, right? And it's like, God damn, it just had like such a word to it, shrink. Going to go to a shrink, you're fucked up in the head. It's like, God damn it, man. So even like the opportunities to be there, the stigma around it was still pretty tough, and so it's nice to know that you found one eventually. And I echo what you're saying. I didn't grow up in a place where therapy was encouraged, and in my adult years, 30, 40, 50, entering 50s almost, it feels like you just need somebody to talk to that's not your family member, that doesn't have a vested interest in your life other than just you being the happiest person. They don't need something from you. It's just like, how do you just have a neutral party that you can chat with that's just going to give you some good advice. And I think
Yeah.
that's all, we all need that shit in all levels of our lives.
And also
And
somebody that's going to
tools.
stand up to you. Like,
Yeah.
I no longer hire therapists or coaches or counselors or guides if they don't feel that they can hold a mirror to my bullshit. And that, I think what's interesting is I grew up knowing that my mom had a therapist, often questioning what the fuck they were doing. Sorry, mom, love you. But I remember being a teenager and thinking, like, what is she even doing in there? Because I couldn't perceive from my very limited viewpoint any changes necessarily. But I remember it being also like this unspoken energy in the space that my mom went to therapy because there was something wrong with her.
Mm.
And so, you know, whether or not that actually impacted my decisions later to pursue counseling and to pursue help, it didn't. And I don't think that, I think it could have if I had more support. But because I didn't feel like I had support, I had to turn towards professionals. And my first experience of like what I would call it, air quoting here, counselor, was my middle school counselor. Like, she was the first person that would sit and listen to me and hold me accountable and help me change my viewpoint on things, which helped impact my behavior.
Mm.
And then, you know, money is often a barrier for people. And so it wasn't until I was on state assistance when I was really struggling as a younger mom. My son was 6 and my daughter was a year old. And I felt like my son was really struggling. This is a great projection. I felt like my son was really struggling with coping with his dad and I's separation and now having a little sister with a stepdad.
Mm.
And so I went to take him in, and they do a whole family assessment, and they really recommended I start seeing someone. And I'm so grateful. I was actually just talking to my now therapist, who I've been seeing for maybe 4 or 5 months and loving. I was talking to her about that woman that I started seeing back in 2008, and how she helped me get sober, and she helped me be honest about the trauma that I had experienced as a child, and that she changed my life like 100%. Like, I would not be the woman I am today if I didn't have that opportunity with her. And that was 18, what is that, 18 years ago? That was 18 years ago. And so I recognize that if I were to meet that version of who she was as a therapist then, she probably wouldn't be attractive to me today.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that with complete humility, that I've had the last 18 years of growth, and I imagine so has she. But she was new at the time. I was new, and she was able to meet me where I was at that time. And so I want to just, share with anybody that's listening, like, the therapist doesn't have to be perfect. They just have to be perfect for you in that moment. So whether it's seeing a Reiki practitioner or going to a meditation class, which our studio that Adam and I both, there's a gentleman that offers free meditation classes at our studio at B1 in Kirkland. So if you want to start anywhere, right? Wherever you're at with your mental health, wherever you're at in whatever tragedy you're walking through, like, finding the method that resonates. And if you're struggling to find anything, maybe start with comedy.
Yeah. Well, they do have like laughter and humor therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about that is that it's free. I
Yeah.
mean, you can actually do therapy for it, paid therapy, but there's nothing stopping you right now from going like, I need a dose of laughter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I were a doctor, I would prescribe laughter to people every single day,
Right.
just as a protective factor. And be
Yeah.
like, just like nutrition, you got to do that for your body and your mind. If you do that every single day, I guarantee you in just a couple weeks, you're going to feel like a new person. If you intentionally laugh like hard every day,
Yeah.
there's nothing that could get to you. Like, you'd be amazed if you just were very intentional about that.
Yeah, I did a laughter yoga class one time. I will say those types of things are not usually my jam. Like I will immediately feel annoyed and just be super judgmental and be like, this is fucking ridiculous. And I felt that way until everyone started participating. And I laughed so hard by the end of it. I definitely felt the relief, but is that something that I would normally like sign up for? No. I just happened to be at I think it was a festival and there was a workshop and I was like, yeah, I'll try it out. And then I was like, oh my God, what did I do? And then, I end up having like really deep guttural laughter, which is so good for the body. But yeah, there's so many different methods out there. I think what's so beautiful that we've kind of touched on repeatedly throughout this is that it's accessible, right? Like you can put on YouTube, you can put it on any of your streaming devices. Like there's always access to it. So in that case, like if people wanted to find you, they want to come see your show, or are you available online? Do you have recordings that people can watch if they're just wanting to test the waters?
Well, I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook under my Instagram is Barbie.hahaha.
Cute.
And Barbie Applegate on Facebook. So I do post clips of my videos and I have some on YouTube. But I've got some shows coming up. I have kind of a light calendar in summer because I like to do a little traveling in summertime. But I'm doing a menopause show on the 22nd of June. And then I have another show at the Winemakers Reserve in Woodinville on the 27th of June. And I've got a big show at the Kirkland Performance Center on August 7th. So those are just a few things coming up for the summer.
Very cool. I love KPC. I've seen some of the most amazing bands there. And just you're so close. I love being able to see the eyes of the person performing rather than just watching them on a big screen. Like stadium has its place, and I'm sure it's better for the artist, but for the viewer, I love to be able to see the beads of sweat.
Yeah.
I'm also on the board of directors for the Kirkland Performance Center.
Hey, all right, very cool.
Yes, I do love them.
That's awesome.
Very
love
cool.
it too.
Well, thank you so much. I love hearing the arc of your journey and just seeing like how positive it's turned out, right? And I think that's like we kind of alluded to it earlier when we talked about hindsight. The thing that we're experiencing is so the thing in the moment. Give yourself some time, exercise your tools, find your healing journey from that, and look it back. You create a narrative that makes the most sense for you. Like there's learning opportunities constantly in these traumatic parts of life, and I empathize with everybody that has trauma in their life, which is all of us. But it can be something that fuels you, and it's not for me to make that decision for you. That's for us, the person going through the trauma, to find that way to alchemize it into something that is positive. Right. And it's a journey, and it's not always a checkbox. Done it, figured it out. We got to revisit that later. Right. So thank you for being an example of that for us and our listeners to look up to.
Thank you. Well, my motto is always, life is good. You just got to live it up.
Love that.
Take some risks.
Damn straight.
And have fun. My God, it's fun. I love being alive.
Yeah, that's the thread that I kept picking up from you too, is gratitude, right? You telling your kids, like, go out there and do some crazy shit, say yes. But also just like being really grateful that you have the opportunity to do said things. And what a blessing that you were able to learn that from what your father went through, to not give up,
Amen.
Yeah, it's going to be different.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Barbie. We appreciate you, and we look forward to having you back.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. Remember to like or subscribe to the podcast on whichever platform you're listening to. And if you found this episode helpful, please comment or share it with a friend. Check out the show notes for links to get in touch with myself, Awa, or our guest. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. This episode was recorded, edited, and produced by Adam Reel.